Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one. I'm the certified deal closer.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast. Hey guys, welcome back for a new episode of Coinology. We're in season Trey, my favorite season of them all. And I'm so excited to be standing or sitting next to Miss Ardre Orie. Very honored to have her in. I know most of you guys probably are very familiar with her, but those who are not, Ardre is a powerhouse in the literary space, a powerhouse in women empowerment space, and just a powerhouse of a woman. And the fact that you're here today, you took some time out to come talk to me a little bit about yourself and your businesses in which you own. One which is most known is 13th and Joan. How long have you owned 13th and Joan?
13th and Joan has been in existence for 7 years. Mm-hmm. October will be 8.
Seems like you guys have been around for so much longer than that. No. Because I know for myself, here at my agency, whenever I have any clients that need a publishing house, oh, by the way, I just had a call with another client. Lisa will talk to you guys before we need to schedule a meeting. But every time I have a client that is in need of publishing services, I immediately think of you guys.
And we appreciate you because, you know, people always talk about Black women and working together, but you have always been so supportive, and we appreciate you so much.
And you guys do great work. So it's one thing about us supporting Black women. Mm-hmm. It's one thing about us supporting Black businesses. Mm-hmm. But I'm also about supporting Black businesses that exhibit excellence. And everything that you've done and everything that you stand for is all about excellence. But Ardre, I know that you didn't just start off sitting where you are right now. Because how large is 13th and Joan?
So we have published to date, I stopped counting after our 200th book, but we have published over 200 books.
Wow.
We opened 2 additional arms of the agency, or the publishing house. One is an agency which works primarily on branding, because a lot of times, you know, authors do not have their brands intact. And then we have another arm that is focused on international distribution. So we are having a great time and creating a new space, you know, that doesn't exist.
Busy. And most people who own publishing houses such as yours don't look like us.
Correct.
Do not look like us. But you're not only just the owner of 13th and Joan, you're probably one of the most sought after ghostwriters in the game, right? Been doing it for you. Very humble, but most celebrities, influencers, people of power tend to look for you to help tell their story, to curate their story. But that doesn't just happen overnight, right?
Right.
So that comes with a lot of trials, tribulations, and being able to tell a story doesn't just pop in your head. It's from experience. So let's talk a little bit, Ardre, about who you are. Let's go all the way back. Where are you from?
So I'm from Gainesville, Florida. I was born in Fort Lauderdale. And, you know, my life is something that I was just speaking to my husband last night, and he was asking me, you know, about an interview that I had done recently. And I was sharing with him that in the interview, I was asked, what did I anticipate becoming? You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there was a time where I couldn't really see anything because my life was inundated with domestic violence in my home. And I was, you know, the product of a single parent home. And so I really thought, based on the violence that was happening, that there would not be a future for me. My future would kind of be cut short because I would need to protect my mother. And there were times where the man that my mother married would take our car, our transportation. We would have to walk to the corner store to get canned foods. it was a really tumultuous time. So my young years were filled with love, you know, and with a mother who did everything in her power to make sure that she provided for us. But I knew that she had sacrificed, you know, she sacrificed love, she sacrificed happiness, I believe, to raise me. So when she found someone, I didn't want to stand in the way of that. Even though I knew that that was not a good person for her, I didn't want to stand in the way of that. And that me not saying anything, though, did result in all of the things that I shared with you. So there are a lot of childhood memories that are filled with happiness and love because my mother always loved me. But there's a lot of pain as well. And that pain is something that I have used to fuel what I do today.
Were you the only child?
So I had a brother, I have a brother, and he is 17 years older. Okay. So he was already transitioned out of the home, and it was just the two of us.
Okay. And you know, what's something you and I have in common is that when I was growing up, I did not foresee this career for myself. I didn't see anybody else doing publicity or producing or writing or anything of that magnitude. So I just knew in my heart that I wanted to do something big. I wanted to do something bold. I wanted to be different. But I didn't know what that was going to be. I didn't have a name or title to it. I just remember growing up saying I wanted to walk around with a big briefcase into a tall building. Right. But what I would do in that building, I had no idea. So publisher, right, isn't something that most young Black girls aspire to be, right? Right. So when you were younger, what was it that you wanted to do?
So, you know, it's funny. I had a moment. I was in 5th grade. I was 10 years old, and I remember a teacher knocking on the door. Not the teacher who was in the classroom, but another teacher. So she knocked on the door, and she came in, and she said, "I'm here for Miss Adams." That's my maiden name. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble again, because I always got in trouble for talking too much, right?
Me too.
Right, of course. Right. And so I walked the corridor with this teacher. She took me to this classroom. It was filled with color. And she said, you know, I know that in class you are a little bored because you're finishing your work earlier. So I want to work with you for a couple of weeks to create something. And I said, okay, great. Well, if I'm not in trouble, fine. So I said, what do I have to create? And she said, well, you could create anything you want to create. You can draw, you can sing, you can paint, you can write, you can dance, you can do whatever. And I'm like, okay, writing, that's easy. That's the next best thing to talking. So let me write. So that project that was led by open-ended questions turned into a book. I decided to write a book about Black women in my community that we did not see, that I knew were successful, to highlight them. So at that time, showing my age, I had to use the phone book because there was no Google, there was no internet and all those things. I had to track these women down. I had to ask them if I could interview them. I had to come up with the questions, all those things. So once I did that, she asked me what I wanted to do with those interviews. And I said, well, I want to write a book. Didn't know what that really entailed, but I did. I wrote the book. I published the book. I invited the ladies for a book signing. I contacted the press.
You did all this at 10 years old?
10 years old. It still baffles me. And I contacted the press and media. I told them, hey, I'm 10 years old and I'm in 5th grade and this is my school and I want you to come out. They came out, they did an interview, and it was on the front page. And after that day, my mom came to my room and she had her hands were filled with money. And she said, here you go. And I said, well, what is this? And she said, this is yours. And I said, well, where did it come from? She said, it came from the books you sold. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do with it? And she said, anything you want to. And from that day, I learned a very valuable lesson about the power of storytelling. I learned that stories could be monetized. And I learned that stories were important. It was important that we reproduce those. That year forward, we would sell books out of the car, out of the trunk, because people would always say, are you the girl that wrote the book? Are you the little girl that wrote the book? So it was a good thing in our city, in our community, and I learned a lot.
So you were like a local celebrity at 10 years old.
I don't know if you would call it that, but I know that people thought, they recognized me as the little girl on the front page who wrote the book.
Wow. And so your mom, in the midst of this, your mom was actually going through domestic abuse, or had that already passed at that point?
It hadn't happened yet.
Okay.
So I had this epiphany that I love words. I love stories. This is amazing. And then we transition into that next season, which made me put the pen down.
So that's but to ask you, so you put the pen down versus writing? Because some people will write to cover the pain. In your place, you actually went silent.
I went silent and I started to act out. I became a student who I was failing in school. I was on the borderline of expulsion. I misbehaved. I was just in a very bad place. I always tell people, home was a personal hell. And so whenever I got out, it was literally about, letting that energy go somewhere. And so acting out in school was kind of my only outlet.
And so was college ever a thought for you?
Education has always been important. But at the time when the domestic violence was happening, I didn't see anything past when will we be able to exit this situation, and that I would likely be the person who would have to bring an end to it. So I can't say that I saw college.
So you actually were planning to do whatever it took to save your mother.
Absolutely. And I knew that my future would probably be embedded in juvenile detention or something, because the domestic violence laws were very stringent. We couldn't get any help. No one would help us. We didn't have a lot of family in the city. No one would help us, even when we called the police. If she wasn't dead, there was no help.
So did you ever have an interaction with him?
As far as violence, no, because I think that he knew what I was thinking. So he did not physically harm me. It was always my mother, but that meant, I didn't sleep at night because I was always listening. Is she awake? There was a time, again, showing my age, where you could get another number assigned to your home line, right? And so kids at school were like, oh, she has a second line. Like, it seemed like it was lit. It really wasn't. I had that line so that I could call 911 on a regular basis. So, it was a difficult time, but he did not physically harm me because I think he was well aware that I was prepared to do whatever to save my mom.
So is he still here, alive?
I don't know. From the time that we were able, there was a time I was assigned detention, and my mother was supposed to pick me up. She did not pick me up, and I knew I was. I'm like, okay, this is it. So my teacher had to drop me off, and she dropped me off. I went home, walked down the hallway of the house, and I'm calling for my mother. She did not answer, and I found her in a fetal position. She was unrecognizable, and it was that day that I held her and I prayed and I said, okay, God, if you save her, if you allow me to be present for her, I promise that I will not act up. I won't act out. I won't be a part of the disappointment and the hurt for her. Instead, I will turn this energy into something positive if you give me another chance with her. And so he did. And so we got him out because the beating was that bad. And when he went out, there was a warrant for his arrest. And so I worked, side by side with my mom. We worked on trying to get divorce papers served in the time that he was in jail. So we did that. We managed to get that done. When he got out, he would terrorize us. He would throw bricks through the house. He would, throw things at our car. And so I was always looking over my shoulder. When I was out, I was always looking over my shoulder. I was always checking in with my mom. Are you okay? If I went to a football game, are you okay? You good? Those things. But we didn't see him anymore. And I'm thankful for that. So I've never seen him again.
Okay, amazing. Amazing. But fast forward, now you've been married for how long?
September will be 21 years.
21 years. And is this your only marriage or have you been married before?
My only marriage.
So was it difficult? I mean, seeing what your mom had to endure, was it difficult to immediately trust your soon-to-be husband at that time?
Yes, it would have been difficult for me to trust anyone. And recently, I was just speaking to my husband about the high levels of masculinity that we continue to circulate in my home, my mother and I, because we were the men of the house, right? So even in marriage, I have continuously been working on channeling feminine energy. I am not thrilled to jump out and say, I'm an alpha female. No, because I want to live a soft life. I just didn't realize that it was something that was available to me. And so I'm learning that in this stage. But lucky for me, my husband was someone I met at age 14. So I met him while these things were happening, and I knew him to be a good person. So his trust, trusting him was different than trusting someone I would have met much later in life.
And since you met him when you were 14, it's sort of like family outside of just being husband and wife.
Yes.
I mean, you guys have known each other your entire lives.
Yes.
But, that's some of the things that we talk a lot about. Some of my girlfriends, some of them desire to solely be a soft girl. The whole soft girl era, soft girl. And I, too, like you, have to really work hard at the soft girl side,
Yes.
right? I have always, and my situation was not from domestic violence, but mine was more so my father raised me with the anticipation that, my mother and father both raised me, but my father was the one who told me, there's no guarantee that you're going to get married. There's no guarantee that there's going to be this knight in shining armor that's going to come and protect you and provide you all these things. So I'm going to show you how to obtain these things. Right. Even if this person does not appear.
Yes.
And so I became very strong at a very early age. And learning how to turn it off has been a challenge. And I know for most alpha women, they either end up lonely.
Yes.
Never ever getting married, or having a hard time holding relationships.
Right.
Or struggling in their relationships. And so I made it a conscious effort in my life to say, I don't want to be a struggle relationship or in a struggle relationship.
Yes.
So I try extremely hard to turn the soft girl on, right?
Yes.
But I can never turn the alpha completely off. It's just, I can't.
No.
I can't. It's a protection mechanism that, I've grown up and seen aunts who completely depended on a husband or a man to be destitute later.
Sure.
I did not want that to be my story.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So do you have any sons?
So I have a son. My son, so my husband and I, we met at 14. We dated. We dated all the way through college, or all the way through high school. And then at college, we had a break. And during that break, he had our son. And so I always say that my son is my wedding present. He was 2 years old when my husband and I got back together, so he's my baby. There is no, step or any of that, but that is my son, yes.
Okay, so you and the mom... Great relationship?
So it is a cordial relationship. It is a family that has blended, I will say that. It is definitely difficult. That was one of the most difficult things, because I was not raised to understand how to blend. I didn't blend anything because it was just my mother and I. So that was something we had to really work at, understanding how to blend. What are the needs? I think one of the primary things that I did was I told my husband that I would be responsible for communicating with my son's mother for all of the arrangements, for pickups, drop-offs, activities, all of those things. And I think that as women coming together to try to make a concerted effort to raise our son made the situation better for all of us.
I think that was a smart move too. I talked to some of my girlfriends, and the biggest challenges they have as far as the blended part of the relationship is knowing whether or not their partner is really, if they've really cut off that side. That's always going to be. So I think if you remove, now some people will say that may be going too far. But I think that allow you guys to be able to have peace in your relationship to do that, right?
Right, absolutely.
Right. Would you recommend that most women do that?
I would recommend, you know what? I really feel like there are some people, it is an individual situation. What I think that people don't do is talk about what makes them insecure and what makes them comfortable before. I think people get into it because you're married for love, or you think you found happiness, but it is literally something that you need a plan to navigate before you get in it. And then you also need to have a safe space for conversation about the things that come up that you didn't know to even talk about. So I do think when women come together, it creates a certain level of power for the whole family dynamic, and it really was beneficial to us. I also think that when children see their mothers communicating, it creates a safe space, and that's very necessary. But it worked for us. I don't say, I can't say it worked for everyone. There are people who have insecurities about different things. I have a girlfriend. She could date a man that has 5 children and 5 different babies' mothers and be just fine. That's how she is.
See, I applaud you because I remember the love of my life when I was in college. We broke up. And during that breakup, he ended up having another woman, became pregnant. And for me, that solidified the end of the relationship. And I couldn't process beyond that. That was just that for me. I just could not process it. But you were able to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you found out, even though y'all weren't together, the fact that y'all were together from 14 to that point, for young girls, because you think about it, girls in college, they either going to make the decision that you made, or they're going to make a decision that I made, which was I just said I can't, and it was the love. When I say the love of my life, I walked away.
You walked away.
I walked away. How did you feel?
I think that's one of those things where you're like, gosh, that should have been me. You remember, was it Vesta? She made that song, Congratulations. You're like, that's supposed to be me. But what I came to realize is that when my husband and I broke up, it was when I arrived at college, right? So a couple of things. One is that not having the father in my life also meant that was what I demanded of him, right? I was expecting my husband to be my father. And I think that's something that a lot of women do not even talk about or address. I was expecting my husband to be my father. He rose to the occasion and operated in that position. But when I got to college, I didn't want a father anymore. Because this is my first time out of the house. I don't want somebody to tell me what's best for me, even though he had been in college a year before. So he knew things that I did not. But that's not what I wanted. So us breaking up allowed me to have an opportunity to spend time with myself. I had never been on my own, really. I had been with him. So it was a good thing. And I came to realize that I needed that to find me. If we had gotten married prior to that, I would have never known who I was. But by the time we did get back together, even though we had our son, I was content with who I was. I was ready to settle down. I had lived an amazing life in college. I got to experience the best of college. So I didn't have any regrets.
So when you got the call that he had another woman pregnant, how did you feel?
Well, I actually was in a relationship.
Okay.
And
so
I was like, that doesn't have anything to do with me. That's what I thought at that time. Because I was of the mindset that I don't date backwards. There's no reason. It didn't work, so why would I do that? But things happen, they align. And I'll tell you what, when I knew that my husband was my husband, so I was off. You're on again, off again. I was off of the relationship that I had been in. And I happened to see my husband. He had come back to the college town where I was still there. And I saw him out one night and we said, hey, how you doing? We just exchanged numbers and we just checked in, as friends. And I was talking to him. This is probably like months later. And I was just, hey, how you doing? And I'm on the phone talking to him and a lot of my friends are at my house. And I said, are you guys hungry? I'm so hungry. I'm hungry. And probably 30 minutes later, there was a pizza at my apartment delivered. And I was like, I don't think I've ever been heard in the relationship that I was in. I don't think I've ever been heard. This man has always heard me. He's heard my heart. He's listened to me, and he has always wanted to be a protector of my soul. What that says to me is that if anything stands in the way of me being with him, it would be me. And that would be my fault. And I would lose out on my soulmate. So the other blessing that has evolved in having a son is that my husband and I had 2 daughters. I never felt pressure to have a son. It was best that we didn't. There were no comparisons. So we had our son and then we had our daughters, and it made our family complete. So I always think, things happen the way they should, but you know, it was not comfortable. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, this was so easy. It was not. It was very difficult. But we made it, and we are where we are supposed to be.
That's right. That's right. Everybody's journey is different. Now, with having two daughters, and your daughter's not having to go through the struggles that you saw your mom go through.
Right.
What are you telling them about being this strong, independent woman? Are you pushing that on them? Are you trying to push them to be a little bit more softer? What type of advice are you giving your daughters?
You know, it's a mixed bag, and I'm glad you're asking me this, because these are a lot of the same discussions that I have with them. For one, I advise them to look at me and how I honor their father, because it's important for a woman to know how to honor a man who is worthy of being honored. Who is worthy of being honored, right? The other thing that I tell them to do is to watch how their father treats me. Whether we are happy, whether we are not in agreement, look at how we apologize. Look at how we take going to church on Sunday seriously. Look at everything and take from it what you believe you want for your life and leave what you don't, right? That's my first set of advice. For my oldest daughter, she and I just had a conversation. She's in college, and I explained to her, I feel like she has been placed in a difficult situation because when she was born, I was at the cusp of entrepreneurship. Now, you and I both know what it looks like when you are trying to build a business at the beginning. It's not beautiful. You're not beautiful. You're probably not your best self. Your attention is diverted. You're working. You have nothing left to give because you're pouring, attempting to pour from an empty pitcher. So she saw me be very alpha. She saw me being driven. I would literally cook enough meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on a Thursday to last them for a weekend so that I could travel somewhere to go do whatever I felt I needed to be doing for business, whether that was meeting with clients, trying to bring in new business, whatever, right? And then I would come back and be tired and get back up, get them prepared for school, do all those things. On the other side of that, I know she saw her father thinking like, why is this lady doing this? Because I was chasing a dream that was assigned to me. It was not their dream or anything. So a lot of times I think she has seen the go chase it, go get it, like go, the grind. And then on the other side of that, now I'm extremely or much softer because I feel like some of the things I was chasing have manifested. It's not that I'm not still in pursuit, but much of it has manifested.
And this is the part about that, because I too relate the chase. But then you question yourself sometimes as to whether or not the chase was worth it.
Absolutely.
Because I always tell people, you want the shiny object, but are you ready for the sacrifice that comes along with it? And there was a period during the chase that I had to stop and say, wait a minute, Ebony, you're risking your family.
Sure.
I don't want to lose my husband and my children because I'm not present.
Right.
And it's very easy for that to happen. So that's why we see so many of our counterparts out there struggling, trying to get this thing right. And no one really knows the proper answer to this, right? That's why I love sitting down and talking with other strong alpha black women, because our struggle as black alpha women are different than other nationalities. But I will tell you, there is a consequence to every action. Absolutely. And most people don't want to hear that. They think you can, and when I hear people say, you can have it all, there's no such thing as it all.
At a cost.
It's a cost.
Yeah, you're going to pay for it.
It's a cost to it, right?
Yep.
And so when did you say, wait a minute, let me slow down this grind. I'm going. I'm sure there's something that said, I need to slow it down because I have beautiful children. I have a husband. I have a home. Yes, I want to obtain, but I don't want to lose. Because yes, your husband knew you since you were 14, but he has needs and desires as well that we have to make sure we don't ignore.
Right. The time for me, it wasn't like an aha moment. It was kind of like a slow burn. I started to realize that I was achieving things that didn't fulfill me. Right? So it's like if you set a goal and you achieve that goal, you would assume you're going to be happy about it. Whether that's a dollar amount, whether that is a certain, access or resource, whatever it is. But when you achieve things that you set out to do and you completely miss the moment because you're not even stable enough to be present. And when I say stable, it's because I'm on to the next thing. Like,
you said something, missed the moment.
Missed it.
Girl, I missed so many moments.
A ton.
Things that people are like, you didn't celebrate. I wasn't present to celebrate because, again, like you said, I was looking for the next shiny object. My father told me when I was younger, you're never satisfied.
Yeah.
And I took it at that time as, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm not. I'm driven. I'm this and that, da, 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 da. Now older, I look back on that and you miss a lot in life not being satisfied.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot. Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
And I don't know that is something I would change completely when it comes to professionalism. Personally, my satisfaction is in discovering deep joy, the kind that cannot be disturbed, the kind that no matter what someone says or does, it is untapped.
That's right.
That type of joy. It is in being present in moments, being able to put my phone down and not worry about who is sending a message or an email or any of that. Truly living best moments of life off of social media.
That's right.
All of that stuff really matters to me, and those are the things that have become most valuable, in my personal life. And I am so happy about it. And I think that COVID allowed us to turn off in a way that we had not because of the big pause. And so I think after that, I was like, this really doesn't matter. I mean, does, but it really doesn't. And so what is most important to me is that I don't miss. And even now, my prayers, I'm always asking God, let me see my children grow up. Let me see the fruits of my labor. Let me see the things that I've done manifest. I want to be able to see it, and I don't want to miss the moment.
That's right.
So now I wouldn't call it balance because I think I'm still absolutely crazy, right? But I think you have to be crazy to tap into your genius. And we all have it. Nobody has any less or any more. It's just a matter of if we tap into it. But I do value my family. And the other thing that I'll say is that when we are running a business, sometimes we get so engulfed in it that we mistake business for family, right? But when you learn that people doing business with you don't really care.
That's right.
They are not going to be there if you get sick. They are not going to be there, when you need people. Then you have to come back and recognize that you've built something that is far greater.
That's right.
And that's in family. So.
Family, you can't replace family.
Cannot.
And so it takes a very strong person to recognize that I don't want to lose my family chasing a shiny object.
Right.
That's important. And I think, and that's one of the gems that I would share with young women coming along. Be driven, but also be aware.
Yeah.
And be self-aware, because most times people never see their fault and what they should do differently.
Right.
They're always externally looking.
Right.
And I think that's so important, especially for driven women. That is why most women that are driven end up alone, because they're not self-aware.
You must.
They're not self-aware. And so let's talk about finding that perfect mate. What do you, and see, you met your guy when you were 14, so it's kind of hard to say that. But, it's some women, they're alpha women, and they struggle because they're looking for their perfect mate to be just like them. And I think that's a mistake.
Absolutely.
Right. You have to have a balance in the household.
You have to have a balance in the household, and you have to understand that your way is not the only way. I think that's where we get caught up, is expecting people to do things the way that we would do it. And even so, even in meeting my husband at 14, when we got married, we were completely different people. We weren't the same people. We had to learn each other. We're not the same today as we were, back then. Things have changed and we've both evolved. But when it comes to finding your person, I think the first thing we have to do is silence the outside noise. Because a lot of times we're looking for what we think someone else would co-sign on. I never run things about who I'm dating by my girlfriends. Why? Because it's not their relationship.
It's not their thing.
It's not their thing. And what works for them might not work for me.
But the difference, I think, Ardre, that it was easier for us to do that because we didn't have the stress of social media.
Very true.
So many of these women today are so bought into this facade of social media and having to live up to these goals and, competing with the next influencer online, that puts unnecessary stress. I know for me, I'm very protective of my family. I don't put a lot of information about my family online.
Right.
No.
Right.
But in today's time, it's very, very, very different. Right? So,
Agreed.
but what else would you say you would advise?
I would say, we have been given an internal moral and emotional compass for a reason. You always know when it's not right. Whether you continue to accept it, that's a choice. But you know when a guy is not right for you. You know when a guy is not treating you right. You know when someone has your best interests at heart and when they don't. And so I would say examine people at their worst. How do they deal with loss? How do they deal with conflict? How do they deal with drugs, alcohol, sex, spirituality, education? Those are all core values. And I truly believe that if you align with someone on the core values, the rest is communication. How can we get along? How do we settle the things that we don't agree upon? Because that's going to be, and I don't care what relationship, there's never going to be a relationship that doesn't come with baggage.
That's right.
We all bring baggage to a relationship, right? So if you say, I can't date a man with children, well, maybe that's your non-negotiable. But you might be okay with your husband going to the cigar bar every Friday with his friends, whereas someone else might not be okay with that. So it's the core values that matter. If you and a person don't agree on spirituality, it's going to cause some conflict. Doesn't mean you can't overcome it, but it's going to cause some conflict. If you believe that a certain level of education is necessary for advancement and that person does not, it's going to cause some conflict. If you and that person don't see eye to eye on budgetary goals, it's going to cause conflict, right? So they're just core things that I think we have to look at and examine, before entangling with someone.
So like before 13th and Joan, because you said your daughter was a baby when you first started entrepreneurship, and 13th and Joan is only 7 years old.
Yes.
So what was your first endeavor? What did you, jump out and do first?
So before 13th and Joan, I did 9 different businesses and or brands trying to figure it out. Okay. It was not pretty. It was, the first thing I did was resign from my job. I went to school for education. So I was an assistant principal at an elementary school before resigning, right? Resigned from that job. I then created a nonprofit organization. Now, that was 2019. In 2019, that is when the recession happened. And for whatever reason, in many areas, and nobody cancel me or hate me for this, but sometimes when we hear nonprofit, we think not for pay, right? But that's not what it was. So it was very hard to raise money during that time. So I did a nonprofit that was for women and teen girls, teaching leadership skills, etiquette, entrepreneurship, all those things. Okay, started that. We were servicing 500 women and teen girls. I found myself taking money from the grocery budget to buy snacks for the young ladies that I was servicing, right? So after doing that for 5 years, far too long, I realized if I am still robbing Peter to pay Paul, this business is not on fertile ground.
Okay, let's stop there because a lot of people don't get that.
Okay.
They keep on feeding something that's dying just because they feel like this is my dream.
Yes.
This is my. You knew then, even with the passion, it's 5 years in. I probably need to pivot.
You need to pivot.
Right. Okay.
Something's got to happen. Right.
So you then left after that.
So we dissolved the nonprofit company. But what I had done while the nonprofit was happening, we moved from Florida to here, to Atlanta. I was figuring out that no matter what, in order to make money, you have to sell something, right? You can't just be going around doing empowerment speeches. That's not going to bring in an income.
Right.
Okay, so we have to sell something. So I looked at my target audience. We have 500 women and teen girls. What is something that women and teen girls like? Lipstick, lip gloss. Okay, so I started this cosmetics company with lipstick and lip gloss, and it was called I Love Me. And the message of it was to love yourself, because that was a deficit that I noticed. When that happened, Atlanta was just on the cusp of becoming the little Hollywood or whatever you want to call it. So I would go around to photo shoots, and I would offer to be the makeup artist and allow my products to be placed and used, right? Product placement. So I was the makeup artist, and I would do that. And then I was realizing, okay, well, I'm still not on fertile ground, right? But this is a better way for me to market. So in selling that product, I remember being at a shoot, and there were a bunch of women. They looked amazing. They were stunning. They had their makeup done. And I heard them say, oh, don't photograph me like that. Like, that's not my good side. And I was like, wait a minute. Are these people struggling with self-esteem? Like, how is that happening? And it started, and for me, having walked away from a job and being someone who associated my worth with my ability to generate an income, I was feeling very low because I was not generating an income. So I decided I'm going to make a compilation of stories about women who are non-traditional beauties. I'm going to host a retreat. I am going to use my products on them, and I'm going to publish this as a book. So I did that.
Non-traditional beauties, what does that look like?
So it looks like, at that time, nobody was talking about alopecia. Okay, nobody was talking about, there was someone who was very fair, someone who was very dark. There was someone who was overweight, considered by societal standards. There was an albino. There was someone who had been a victim of domestic violence. There was someone who had extreme freckles. Beautiful. So just not societal imposed standards of beauty, right? And so I brought these ladies together. I let them tell me their story. We sat around in a circle. Everybody tell me your story, you speak. There was not a dry eye in the room because every woman had an instance of not feeling her best self. Okay, I listened to their stories. Then I went home and I wrote. Didn't record anything, nothing. We did a beautiful photo shoot with them. And so when I wrote their stories, I called each one of them to read the story back to them. This is what I got from what you said. Here it is. Okay. So people were crying and I was like scared. I'm like, I don't know if they're going to like it or not. Everybody was crying like the same thing. And they said, I couldn't have said it better myself. So we published this book. And because of the fact that there were 21 people and they were featured in the book, they felt like the book was really their book. Everybody took ownership of it. So the day that we had the signing, I did the same thing that I did at 10 years old. I contacted Barnes & Noble. Hey, we want to do a book signing. We invited these women in, but they invited their community. So by the time this book signing happened, it was a massive event because of the fact that all these women believed it to be their project. Which is why I always tell people when you write a book, you should also create community with the book so that you have a built-in audience and a built-in mouthpiece for the marketing of that book. But anyways, after doing that, then someone saw what happened and I got a call from a friend who had a client at VH1. The show, Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, was just starting. And they said, hey, we have a client. She is getting ready to be on this show, but she needs a book for her storyline. Do you think you can write a book in 30 days? And I was like, well, I resigned from my job. I have this baby in one hand, but I can write with the other one. So I wrote that book. And that evolved into being the ghostwriter.
Because now you are the ghostwriter, right?
I like to think that people would like to select me to write their books, yes.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing when you think about it, right?
It's
amazing.
Full circle.
Yeah, because even now when we book 13th and Joan, it's a special thing if you can get Ardre to personally work on your project. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because, to have your stamp on the work is a big deal. So it shows just being honest and authentic to who you were. You went back to the 10-year-old Ardre, and now that 10-year-old, you know, one of the things I talk about in my book, Coinology, Authentically You, I usually challenge people to go back to the days before someone told you weren't good enough, you couldn't, that's not smart,
right?
You need to be afraid. Go back to what is it that you really wanted to do before society put parameters around you. And that's exactly what you did. You went back to the honest and true Ardre.
I did.
Before the trauma.
Before the trauma.
Wow,
right.
wow. And now today, your enterprise. So we have 13th and Joan. What other businesses do you have?
So we have 13th and Joan Publishing House. As a result of that, one of the things I realized is that, you know, the conversation around luxury for Black women needed to be expanded. The conversation around travel. And I realized that getting away sometimes from the day-to-day allows the creative to breathe. So I started Ardre Orie Retreats, which is a luxury writing retreats, destination vacations, and we just literally get away and go write. So we've been to Paris, we've been to Belize, we've been to Cabo, and we're continuing to plan trips, you know, for women to just get away and write. And that's whether you're a screenwriter, whether you're, you know, a playwright or you're an author, no matter what the format is, we, you know, offer that opportunity. So there's Ardre Orie Retreats. I also started Crown Avenue. So this is a company that is luxury essentials, vegan leather essentials, travel essentials. When I was traveling back and forth to meet clients, I wanted a cute, chic way to store my laptop. My laptop is always with me.
Now, we have one with us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's take a look at this. I was lucky to have one today. We have one here.
Yes, and I love it. And so I started this because, first of all, it was kind of an ode to my mom and my grandma. You remember moms and grandmas always had this envelope-looking clutch for church.
Yes.
But I thought, this is really cute. I can take this, put my laptop in it, and I can go to a meeting in the boardroom, or I can go out at night, right? And so I started that, and then it turned into weekenders, and it started in turn to designing handbags. But it was a way for me to continue to tell stories, but sometimes you need another way to channel your inspiration. So started that company. And the other thing that I launched is the Orie Agency. And we are finding that more and more people want to adapt their books into other formats. And so we do adaptations of books into screenplays, screenplays into books, plays into screenplays, plays into books, vice versa. So any of those, taking what you have, that content, and creating it in another format is another way to attain or monetize your story. And I don't think people realize that one story can be divided into so many
multiple
income
ways.
streams.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. You know, I think another thing that I want to make sure people take away from this is how you diversify your portfolio. One of the things I advise many people to do is to find products and services in your diversification that are linked but not dependent, so that if one industry tanks, all of your money doesn't tank.
Yes.
Some people, what they think when they say diversification of portfolio, they still put everything in the same industry.
Right.
Which is a mistake.
Right.
You always want to make sure that there's a link, which makes sense. So in your case, your luxury items link back to, so you still being a writer, because you can put your laptop and your writing essentials in there, but they're not necessarily depended on the writing industry. The same thing for your travel, and you tie it back to those who travel, right? But at the same token, it is a completely different industry. So I think it's important that as we build portfolios that diversify.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So in closing, because I know you have so many, I know you're probably about to go and write 20 more million amazing stories. What do you want to leave your fan base with, your followers with? What is it that you want to leave them knowing about you that they don't currently know?
You know, at the end of the day, I always say that, you know, people say, I want to be a voice for those that don't have a voice. But I don't. I want to pass the mic. You know, I want to make sure that the little girl, the little Ardre who felt like she wasn't seen is. I want to make sure that the woman who has to transition into multiple locations and speak to multiple people and become multiple versions of herself. You are not the same Ebony here in this space as you might be in a boardroom. To the core, you are the same person, but you have to be a different person. I want women to feel seen. I want Black men to feel loved and honored and respected. And I want for young people to recognize that there are no parameters on what is possible. And I think it's very important that we understand education is not always committed to four walls. I am not a formally trained writer. I am not a formally trained screenwriter, but these are spaces that I am thriving in.
You've excelled.
Because I love it. And so I want people to just remember to always find what you love, because it is very true that your gifts will make room for you.
Let me say this. I think the reason why you've excelled so much in the space of writing, even though you're not formally trained, is because you found your way and you're doing it your way. When everybody's doing something the same way, it's very difficult for you to stand out and build your space. So I will tell people, I don't want you to think that I'm promoting haphazardly going out here. I think you should become an expert at whatever it is that you're doing, but know that you have to find your way at doing it. And that is how you end up going to the front of the classroom very fast. Is being unique and being different. I want to thank you today for coming out and taking the time and visiting us in Season Trey. It is an honor to sit next to you. To me, you're a living legend. And I want many other young Black women to see you and say, she did it and so can I.
Absolutely. And thank you. The sentiment is mirrored. We would not be able to see one another without seeing one another. So I thank you for your work. You are excellence. You represent excellence. And I love to see it. It lights my soul when I see the work. You're not just talking about it. You're doing it. We're sitting here in a space, honey. We're not just, somewhere. And so I want you to continue. I want you to be encouraged. And I want you to make sure that you always find time to be proud of yourself as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Coinology. See you next time.
Get no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one. I'm the certified deal closer.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.